I think partly in light of that comment and partly because of the delay, I think it is important that there are measures put in place between now and the legislation to protect the records that are out there, because it is the case that there are people who have no compulsion in law. There's nothing that requires them to hand over what would be private records. So we're reliant totally on the goodwill of the individual, and in that instance that is a good person, but they still have the records. They could have quite as easily thrown all that into the bin and with it the identity of hundreds of people potentially. So it's incredibly serious, and I think it's hard to see how that would be an isolated incident. If the Minister could just deal with it, I know you're working on the bill. I think it is regrettable that it's still being worked on, because we would have thought we would have seen it before now. I'd be a bit concerned about the central role for the Adoption Authority. There have been questions raised by maybe some of the adoption rights organisations about the functioning of that body, and while they may not be given all of the files, I think is what you're saying, they would certainly be charged with having responsibility for them. And I wonder how that fits in with the present situation where the HSE have collected the files in Glanmire. And if memory serves me correct, last year, from my dealings with staff down there, they totally don't have the resources to do anything with those files. So if actually somebody comes looking to get that information, nobody can help them, and there's nobody working on putting that in a presentable way so that people can help to find their identity. And is there plans to deal with that backlog from a staffing point of view?
On the Minister to reply.
Well, I would suggest, Deputy Wallace, that gentleman who has these adoption records would have a discussion with the HSE or the Adoption Authority in relation to those records and the possible handing over of them, because it would seem to me that that would be the right thing to do. If he's a private individual who's access to what are adoption records from the past, I think, as I say, work has already begun with the HSE gathering together records. And if you know about records, and if an individual has records, I certainly believe that in the first instance there should be a discussion about it with the HSE or the Adoption Authority if he wishes to hand over those records and is in a position to do so, because it would be far preferable than the remaining, as Deputy Daly has said, in private hands. Work has begun already, as I have said. The HSE have gathered together files from a variety of sources already. I think I've given the information earlier in my reply, the number of places where they've been gathered from. There is no reason not to continue that, so that process is in place. Clearly, given the numbers of adoptions that took place in Ireland over the years, there is a large task in terms of managing those records and organising them so that they are more accessible. And this is something the HSE adoption services are very conscious of. Clearly, the overall adoption situation is changing, as I've said during the week, really very dramatically. Not just it's changed nationally, but internationally there is quite a drop in relation to adoption. But the HSE still has an adoption service and adoption workers, and I think this is an area that they will be increasingly working on.